Hi, everyone. I want to welcome you to our presentation tonight. My name is Amy Conacher, and I'm the Executive Director of the Australian American Chamber of Commerce here in Houston, and I'm glad that you can join us all tonight. Before we get started with the content portion of the evening, I want to give you just a couple of housekeeping bits of information. We have muted your microphone and your video, so if you wouldn't mind keeping those off for the duration of the presentation, that would be terrific. We will have a live Q&A after the presentation, so if you want to put any questions into the chat tool, that would be terrific. And Christina will be moderating that at the end. So our speakers will answer those questions. They'll be able to see them through that chat window. And any that don't get answered by the end of the session, we will pass those on via email. And then I'll send a thank you tomorrow or early next week that will have a link to the presentation, the recording, as well as any missed questions that we had. So rest assured they will be answered. So now I would like to hand over to Christina Stabe. Christina is the Chamber Board President, and she is also the Senior Client Engagement Lead for the Global Carbon Capture and Storage Institute, and she is based here in Houston. Over to you, Christina.
Thanks so much, Amy. On behalf of the Australian American Chamber of Commerce of Texas and its Board of Directors, I'd like to welcome you all to the second webinar of a three-part series about Australia's energy resources. We've so enjoyed working with this team all over the years, and although we can't be in person, as we usually are, we're very grateful for the opportunity to host this event virtually. As an Australian-US organization, we value relationships with government, companies, and individual professionals looking to invest in Australia and Texas as we fulfill our mission of strengthening the relationship between our two great countries. Let me now hand it over to Dorothy Close. Dorothy is the Director, Regional Geoscience at the Northern Territory Geological Survey. Dorothy?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for attending the second installment of Australia's Energy Resource Series. My name is Dorothy Close, and I'm Director of Regional Geoscience at the Northern Territory Geological Survey. And it will be my absolute pleasure to provide you with an update on the energy strategies, activities, and investment opportunities of Australia's magnificent Northern Territory. In a post-COVID-19 landscape, the Territory is now embarking on a journey towards an economically sustainable future, with energy and gas manufacturing playing a pivotal role. Renewables are the future of energy production, with our world-class energy resources positioning the Territory for growth in a net zero emissions world. Battery storage and hydrogen production are rapidly becoming more commercial through technological innovations, but there is further to go before the Territory can completely transition to firmed, dispatchable, renewable electricity. As we work towards our 2050 target for net zero emissions, our world-class offshore and onshore gas deposits will play a vital role as a transitional fuel in the journey to renewables. The Territory will focus on building the foundations to support the growth of local renewable hydrogen industry and creating the opportunities for early adoption of renewable hydrogen as a fuel source. Detailed assessment of the international hydrogen market and supply chains will provide the opportunity for the Territory to consider the alternative development pathways available to scale to export as industry and technologies mature. In the commitment to develop the Territory's onshore gas potential and to open up new areas for onshore exploration in the Territory, the Northern Territory Government announced an acreage release in June this year. The areas available for oil and gas exploration through this release are located in the southern edge of the Neoproterozoic to Paleozoic Georgina Basin, an underexplored basin with potential for conventional and unconventional petroleum plays. The acreage release area has been selected on the basis of its petroleum prospectivity and limited exploration. The southern Georgina Basin contains a thick Middle Cambrian succession that includes organic-rich shales with 3 known petroleum systems. There are multiple oil shows recorded throughout the Cambrian succession, and numerous conventional stratigraphic and structural traps have been identified. There is substantial supporting data that is freely available, which includes regional geology, 2D seismic surveys, and 13 exploration wells, some of which have undergone hydraulic fracture stimulation and testing. There are 2 separate but adjacent areas for release, each being over 3 million acres in area. The application period is currently open and will shortly close at 4 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on the 16th of November 2021. Applications will be assessed on the proposed work program, plus the financial capacity and exploration expertise of the applicant. If you're interested, and we hope you are, further information on the application process can be found via the hyperlink or the QR code at the bottom of the slide. The Northern Territory remains vastly underexplored with highly prospective geology, and to stimulate further exploration and de-risk investment, the Northern Territory and the federal government are funding substantial programs in pre-competitive geoscience data in many of the Territory's onshore basins. This includes in the Amadeus Basin, the Northern Territory's producing oil and gas basin with the potential for hydrogen, helium, carbon capture and hydrogen storage. Northern Territory Geological Survey is undertaking basin-wide stratigraphic correlations and structural architecture studies to understand the potential of this vast basin. In the Greater MacArthur Basin Beetaloo Subbasin, the Northern Territory's premier shale gas play, Northern Territory Geological Survey is also undertaking basin-wide stratigraphic correlations and structural architecture studies to understand the potential of these stacked basins, which cover a third of the Northern Territory onshore landmass. In the southeast, the Warburton, Paderca, Eromanga basins, there's a joint federal, Northern Territory and South Australian government collaboration to understand the basin-wide stratigraphic correlation, structural architecture and petroleum systems in this poorly understood section of Australia's geology. And in the South Nicholson Basin, the Northern Territory's emergent frontier basin with hydrocarbon potential, significant federal government funding and Northern Territory government funding have acquired first ever seismic acquisition in this area with complementary drilling program, which is providing new data to an emerging frontier basin. Exploration in the Beetaloo Subbasin is progressing from the exploration to appraisal phase, with activity accelerating in 2021. Exploration in the central part of the Beetaloo Subbasin is operated by Origin Energy in joint venture with Falcon Oil and Gas. In August 2021, Origin performed extended production testing at Amungi in Northwest 1H, a nearly 4 kilometre well that includes over a kilometre horizontal section. The well was originally drilled and production tested in 2015-16, with production averaging at just over 1 million standard cubic feet per day. The results of production log testing in 2021 indicated that most production was sourced from only 4 of the 11 hydraulic stimulation stages, and on this basis, normalised gas flow rates are now estimated to be between 5 and 6 million standard cubic feet per day. In October 2019, Origin spudded the Kyalla 117 N21 well, testing the liquids-rich shale gas play in the Kyalla formation. The well was drilled to a vertical depth of nearly 2 kilometres, and hydraulic stimulation of a 1.5 kilometre lateral section occurred in September 2020. In January 2021, the well flowed unassisted for 17 hours with initial gas composition indicating liquids-rich gas with 65% methane, nearly 90% ethane, and a C3 plus gas component of just over 14% with low CO2. Extended production testing at Kyalla 117 during 2021 demonstrated liquids-rich gas flows for intermittent periods, although production was not sustained. In August 2021, Origin spudded a well to test the Valkyrie wet gas play, Valkyrie 76 S21, which was successfully drilled to a vertical of depth just over 2 kilometres and demonstrated the continuity of the prospective Amungi member of the Valkyrie formation towards the eastern flank of the subbasin within the wet gas window. Future testing of Valkyrie 76 is planned. Santos Limited also has exploration tenure in the Beetaloo Subbasin in joint venture with Tamboran Resources Limited. In November 2019, Santos re-entered the previously drilled Tanambrini 1 vertical well and commenced a 4-stage stimulation program. Flow testing of the well in 2020 confirmed a dry gas discovery in the Middle Valkyrie shale gas play. In August 2021, Santos completed the drilling the Tanambrini 2H horizontal well to a total depth of just over 4.5 kilometres, including a horizontal section of just over 1,000 metres in the B shale of the Amungi member. A second horizontal well, Tanambrini 3H, was spudded in August. The company's plans to fracture stimulate and flow test both wells before the end of 2021. In September 2020, Empire Energy spudded the Carpentaria well near the eastern margin of the Beetaloo Subbasin, which was drilled to a depth of 1.9 kilometres and intersected extensive intervals of liquids-rich gas within shale Valkyrie formation. In October 2021, Empire announced the result of hydraulic stimulation and flow testing of the vertical well with an average flow rate of 0.3 million standard cubic feet per day over 10 days. Drilling of the Carpentaria 2H horizontal appraisal well, just north of Carpentaria 1, is scheduled before the end of 2021. The Australian federal government is also fully supportive of developing the Beetaloo Subbasin as part of its gas-fired economic recovery strategy. The recent announcement of the Beetaloo Strategic Basin Plan sets out significant investment for the Australian Government to accelerate the exploration and development of the sub-basin. Key components of the plan include building a clearer picture of the resource through incentivising gas operators to finalise their exploration activities through the $50 million Australian Beetaloo Cooperative Drilling Program. In July this year, Empire Energy announced that they had received 21 million Australian dollars of grant under this program. The plan will also include collaborating with the Northern Territory Government to address barriers to finalising exploration and appraisal activities. It will also include investing just over 170 million Australian dollars to upgrade roads supporting the development of gas resources in and around the Beetaloo. And it will work to identify the resources need to ensure positive outcomes to the traditional owners when developing the Beetaloo. And the Northern Territory has a vision to be recognised as a leader in the world's transition to renewable hydrogen. The vision includes an export-scale renewable hydrogen industry by 2035 or earlier, with Darwin becoming a key renewable hydrogen expert hub, leveraging on experience and natural resource expert to build a complementary hydrogen export industry. The vision includes the Territory becoming market leader in sustainable microgrids, with renewable hydrogen becoming an integral part of regional and remote power generation to facilitate an average of 70% or more renewable energy penetration, and a market leader in renewable hydrogen-fueled power generation. Hydrogen blended in increasing quantities for gas power generation with higher percentages as capital replacement programs offer the opportunity for more hydrogen-capable assets. Also a market leader in renewable hydrogen workforce development. The Territory partners with Charles Darwin University and training organisations to create new skill development pathways and apprenticeships for emerging renewable hydrogen jobs. And a market leader in renewable hydrogen-powered industry. The Territory can capitalise on the opportunity to expand the local renewable hydrogen value chain to provide additional services. The vision includes a mature renewable hydrogen transport corridor. Hydrogen refuelling stations along highways open the Territory for long-distance hydrogen haulage and other hydrogen fuel vehicles. The vision will also include secure and reliable renewable hydrogen supply and value chain infrastructure. Hydrogen export and advanced manufacturing is enabled by renewable energy zones delivering cheap energy through electricity and renewable hydrogen superhighways. It includes global scale geological storage that offers the potential for cost-competitive, long-term and large-scale renewable hydrogen storage. And the Territory's value proposition to be able to realise this vision lies within its abundant renewable energy resources, with world-class solar resource in some areas over 30 megajoules per square metre, and good wind resources in the southern and central NT. There's also large areas of land availability for solar farms and support of renewable hydrogen production, including areas close to existing and future ports. In terms of water availability, the Northern Territory's northern coastline has the potential of desalinisation programs. The geology of the Northern Territory has potential for large-scale long-term hydrogen storage, and the proximity to export markets with Darwin as the closest capital city and deep-sea port to key export markets. With substantial areas of solar irradiance, the Territory is highly suited to large-scale solar projects, and this can be seen as significant private investment in solar farms. The Sun Cable project, the project designed to export electricity to Singapore from a 12,000-hectare solar farm in Central Australia via a subsea cable and supported by the world's largest battery. The project intends to supply 17 to 20 gigawatts of power, and to the extent the provision of 20% of Singapore's power needs plus surplus energy for the Northern Territory grid. The final investment decision on this project is due in 2023, with the first energy scheduled to Darwin in 2026 and to Singapore in 2027. The support for solar farms is also, and the private investment in solar farms is also evidenced by the purchase of ENI Australia in three Northern Territory solar farms. This has been contributing to the renewable energy target with a power purchase agreement with the state-owned Jacana Energy in place. This has been a very quick overview of the Northern Territory and its energy opportunities. Please see this list of further information if you'd like to follow up on any of the information that was provided today. And if you have any questions, I would be delighted to answer them. And please feel free to contact me should you require any information. Thank you so much for your attention. And I think we all in Australia hope to see you in person sometime in Houston soon. Thank you so much.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Eleanor Alexander, and I'm going to give you an update on South Australian energy resources and the energy transition. I'm going to be joined by a colleague, Mr. Richard Day, for the question and answer section. The South Australian Department for Energy and Mining consists of 4 divisions. You're going to hear from 2 divisions tonight. That's me in Energy Resources Division and Richard Day in the Growth and Low Carbon Division when we get on to the question and answer session. The department's just had a rebranding and a refocusing of what we're all about. You can see the new logo on the left-hand side. The map shows the current status of petroleum licences in South Australia. Granted licences are shown in blue and the applications are shown in pink. We have the competitive tender basins, the producing basins like the Cooper and the Otway Basin, where we have to do acreage releases, and we are building up some vacant acreage currently, so we may look at some new acreage releases next year. Elsewhere in the state, you lodge over-the-counter applications, and you do have the option to top file over long-standing applications. Natural hydrogen exploration licensing can now occur via a petroleum exploration licence. And since February, we've seen 6 companies lodge 19 new petroleum exploration licence applications that are targeting natural hydrogen. The first licence, PEL 687, was granted to Gold Hydrogen in July, and it covers York Peninsula and Kangaroo Island. There will be more licences granted for natural hydrogen in the next few months. This talk's going to highlight the diversity of energy projects that are currently happening in South Australia, but I think it's worth mentioning that fast and flexible natural gas remains an important part of the state's energy mix. In 2019, AGL completed the Barker Inlet Power Station, which is capable of operating at full capacity within 5 minutes. And the idea is that it'll provide a rapid response to changes in renewable energy generation supply. South Australia already has leading practice regulation in place for carbon capture and storage, or CCS, and gas storage. There's a range of licences available for gas storage, from exploration through to retention, and then licences that enable a company to actually store gas. Depleted oil and gas fields in the Cooper and Otway basins have excellent potential as storage reservoirs suitable for CCS. Analyses by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and the International Energy Agency has consistently shown that carbon capture storage is an essential part of the lowest cost path towards meeting climate targets. To that end, the department is implementing a framework to facilitate carbon capture and storage projects. Santos are proposing a carbon capture storage project at Moomba in depleted Cooper Basin oil and gas fields. The initial target is 1.7 million tonnes of CO2 per year, but in the longer term, the ambition is storing up to 20 million tonnes a year from other industrial emitters. Santos are also exploring the production of zero emissions hydrogen enabled by the CCS project. On the right-hand side, you'll see their SEO, or Statement of Environmental Objectives document. The Santos environmental documents have been approved and gazetted and are ready to be used as part of the activity notification submission. This stage is the last approval required before on-ground works may commence. Santos are in the process of submitting their activity notification, which includes a monitoring and verification plan. And these are key documents to ensure that the injected CO2 remains permanently stored. The federal government announced on the 1st of October this year that it had finalised and registered carbon credits, carbon farming initiative, carbon capture and storage methodology determination. This CCS method will enable large-scale projects that capture greenhouse gases for permanent storage in underground geological formations to generate tradable Australian carbon credit units under the Emissions Reduction Fund. Santos are applying to register their Moomba carbon capture storage project with the Clean Energy Regulator and generate carbon credit units. As I mentioned earlier, petroleum explorers in South Australia are starting to look for opportunities for carbon capture and storage in their licences. Gidgee Energy in the South Australian Cooper Basin are proposing to use ArcoStim technology, which they've been involved in developing and which is currently subject to the patent process. ArcoStim's designed to create large, high permeability stimulated reservoir volumes in deep and thick Cooper Basin coal seams. They're going to produce gas from the coal seams and then sequester the CO2 into the coal seams. Their idea is that these deep stimulated reservoir volume areas will be the ideal spot to permanently trap carbon dioxide because CO2 will adsorb onto the coals. So this is a project that we're going to be watching with interest. If you want more information, please contact David Warner. His email's in the slide. Moving on to exploration for natural hydrogen. It's early days. The first licence was only granted in July this year, and you can see it in the map shown in bright yellow. The map also shows applications that have been lodged by a number of other companies also seeking natural hydrogen. So why the interest? High levels of hydrogen were measured from gas samples taken by departmental geologists from old wells on Kangaroo Island, York Peninsula and the Otway Basin. The information was sort of buried in the archive until recent international researchers have published their results highlighting these hydrogen occurrences. The most recent paper is by Borum et al. And came out at the APIA conference. Potential natural hydrogen source rocks include ultra-basic rocks and iron-rich cratons, which we have in South Australia, as well as uranium-rich basement. So it looks like the basement geology is favourable. But again, it's early days. The proposed company exploration programs are basically including field work with airborne geophysics and possibly drilling later in their 5-year programs. So it's going to be an exciting time to see how this new potential resource evolves. So I'm going to get out of my comfort zone a little bit and give you some highlights of South Australia's energy transition. There's a diversity of projects going on. Renewable electricity generation, the world's largest battery, large-scale projects in the energy pipeline for wind, solar and storage, great uptake of solar photovoltaic power systems with households and accelerating adoption by businesses, the largest per capita rollout of home batteries, and the Hydrogen Action Plan, which is looking at scaling up renewable hydrogen production for export and domestic consumption. South Australia's Hydrogen Action Plan has a number of themes: facilitating investment, establishing a regulatory framework, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, deepening trade relationships, supply chain capabilities, innovation, workforce skills development, and integrating hydrogen into our energy system. And I'll briefly touch on an example of that. The objective is to scale up hydrogen production for export and for domestic consumption. The state's Climate Change Action Plan commits to embracing future fuels like hydrogen, but recognises that a robust regulatory framework is needed to ensure safe operations. It's proposed that the scope of the Petroleum and Geothermal Energy Act 2000 is expanded to cover the production and pipeline transmission of hydrogen, and this is currently before Parliament. If successful, the Act will be renamed the Energy Resources Act. This new Act will cover generation of hydrogen from means not already permissible. So that includes electrolysis of water, and it will enable a hydrogen generation licence to be granted. This provides all hydrogen generation sectors with the same leading edge practice, regulatory and one-stop shop or one window into government regime that the oil and gas industry currently enjoys. A hydrogen export tool to attract investment is available for project proponents from the Renewables South Australia website. One of the aims of the state's Hydrogen Action Plan is to integrate hydrogen into the state's energy supplies, and an example of this is Hydrogen Park South Australia. Since May 2021, Australian gas networks have supplied a blend of natural gas and 5% renewable hydrogen to 700 customers through the existing gas network, which is an Australian first. The Hype SA 1.25 megawatt electrolyser at Tonsley Innovation District, which is just south of downtown Adelaide, is the largest electrolyser currently operating in Australia. The project is also supplying industrial hydrogen customers via truck. This slide summarises some of the opportunities to unlock the value of the state's renewable energy resources, and they exist from a domestic scale through to industrial scale. So anything from electrifying domestic transport and expanding the recharging network around the state, decarbonising the gasworks, like the project you heard about at Tonsley, and decarbonising existing industrial emissions are on the agenda. Exporting power interstate, power that's generated from renewable energy, exporting hydrogen overseas, and attracting energy-intensive industries back to the state to produce and export green commodities, such as green ammonia, green fertiliser, and then looking at green mineral production for steel and for copper. So there's a diversity of opportunities available. This slide aims to give a very quick snapshot of South Australia's mineral resources, with a focus on the minerals that are going to assist the world's energy transition. The state's got 67% of Australia's economic demonstrated copper resources, and we host a Copper to the World conference each year. You can see copper occurrences and mines shown in green, the map on the top right. Magnetite's another resource where the state's got a significant part of Australia's economic demonstrated resource. 44% of the nation's magnetite resource is located in domains on Eyre Peninsula, in the O'Leary region and on York Peninsula. The state's got 65% of Australia's graphite resources, and you can see them shown in the yellow map occurring on Eyre Peninsula. In terms of rare earths, South Australia's got the most advanced technology smelter in the country at Port Pirie to produce rare earths. And for completeness, here's the department's disclaimer. Thanks very much for taking in this slideshow. I'm going to be joined by my colleague Richard Day, who's the Director of Strategy, Policy and Communications for the Growth State and Low Carbon Transition Team in the Department for Energy and Mining, who'll be able to answer questions about the state's energy transition and renewables. So thanks again for your attention.
All right, great. Well, let's get started with the open Q&A. If you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat box and we'll get them in front of the speakers. We do have a few questions to start us off. Eleanor, if you want to turn on your audio and video as well, that would be great. Well, Dorothy, let me start with you. Wanted to ask, you talked a lot about CCS in Northern Territory. Can you elaborate a little more about what options are being considered for CCUS and the NT?
Yes, thanks, Christina. In September this year, the Territory Government announced it's entered into a partnership with CSIRO and a number of energy companies to assess the viability of a large-scale low-emissions carbon capture utilisation and storage hub based in a designed precinct right next to the existing LNG facilities in the Darwin Harbour region. And it's designed to be one of the largest multi-user, multi-access hubs globally, linking to offshore CCS sites. So it's the design of a precinct that can develop the future of the carbon capture industry in the Territory. Also, Santos, who owns the Darwin LNG facility, has also recently announced it's signed an MOU with East Timor to look at utilising their depleted gas fields at Bioinden for carbon capture storage, utilising the existing pipeline infrastructure from Darwin. At the moment, the onshore CCS opportunities are currently less advanced. I was just texting Eleanor, I saying I wish we had the regulation that South Australia has, but we'll certainly learn from them. But both the industry and government are really interested in looking at future geological storage sites in onshore NT.
Yeah, and I do want to come back to that, the potential for storage in ANT, but since we're talking about CCS, Eleanor, can you elaborate a little bit more on how CCS projects in South Australia are being supported through research? I think you mentioned some joint research activities that are being undertaken.
Yeah, sure. So we've got a good regulatory framework in place already, and the department's been making some significant grants to the University of Adelaide's Australian School of Petroleum and Energy Resources. Professor John Cowdy, who some people here may know, has led pretty extensive research programs into CCS over some decades, and we're tapping into their knowledge with projects on some of the subsurface engineering issues that will have general application globally, and also some of the specific tectonic and measuring risking potential storage sites in the Cooper Basin. So yeah, we're looking forward to an exciting collaboration there.
Oh, great. Thank you for that. We've had a good question from the audience, and Richard, it's actually for you. Colin McCaddy is asking if you can give us any update on the world's largest battery and how that's going.
Great question. No, the batteries outperforming really expectations. So it was originally installed as a 100 megawatt battery, 129 megawatt hours, and really there to provide frequency support and system security sort of services to the South Australian grid. That was the South Australian government ran a tender to basically strike a 10-year offtake contract for those services. So that's what resulted in the project being built. Then there was a subsequent grant from both South Australian government and then the Commonwealth government to, if you like, upsize the battery by another 50%. So it has been extended by 50%. And the second part of the battery is really around, I guess, demonstrating provision of synthetic inertia. So there's sort of two phases to the battery, and the first phase has been up and running since late 2017, and then the synthetic inertia stage is the battery's been installed, and that's been sort of rolled out.
Great, and no, thanks very much for that, Richard. I see we have someone sort of pondering on a question, and when that comes through, I'll certainly ask it. But it just from the standpoint of talking about latest developments, Dot, you went through in great detail the hydrogen strategy that the NT's put out there, really focused on the opportunity for the NT to generate a significant amount of renewable hydrogen. Can you talk a little bit more about the latest developments? And then you also mentioned the opportunity to potentially store hydrogen in the Amadeus Basin. Are there other storage locations that are being contemplated in the NT?
Yes, thanks, Christina. I think, and again, interestingly, Eleanor touched on this as well. The first priority probably for the Northern Territory is actually to move its fleet assets to be hydrogen capable, and they've already started that process in terms of getting hydrogen capable generation or booking in hydrogen capable generation assets in Darwin's
generation Channel Island facility, and there will be a continued move towards moving those assets into hydrogen capable over the next couple of years. And that's kind of the first really important point for making sure that we are able to absorb hydrogen as an energy source within the Northern Territory. The other kind of really interesting thing is that we're actually developing with the Australian government a series of hydrogen hubs, one of them being counterintuitively in Central Australia in the Tennant Creek area, which is seen as being more of an arid area and not so much water available. But there is a really interesting project that's being undertaken by a private company called Aqua Arima, who's looking at technology to produce water captured from the air and produce hydrogen through solar power generation. And the other really interesting kind of movement that's happened recently is the regeneration interest in, and I know probably Eleanor's got to say this too, geothermal as an energy source for converting water into hydrogen as well. And there's plenty of opportunities in the Northern Territory for that kind of option. And it's interestingly, one of the new companies that is looking at this, and it's an interesting one from a geologist's point of view, when they come actually not which will then opportunities and certainly plenty of energy opportunities. So it's a really interesting dynamic space. I think the Northern Territory government, along with all the other states, a active approach to hydrogen. So we're looking for opportunities and very keen to hear from industry as to where they see the opportunities being. There's a bit of a snapshot. There's so much going on.
No, I totally get that. There is so much going on, and it seems like every time we talk about hydrogen, the conversation changes and shifts, and people think of new ways to utilize it and new ideas. Eleanor, do you want to add on a little bit more about South Australia's hydrogen activities?
Actually, I'll leave it to Richard because he's the guru.
Okay, fair enough, Richard.
No worries. Just I suppose at a high level. Yeah, in 2017, as a state, we produced our hydrogen roadmap. So we were sort of the first Australian jurisdiction to sort of recognise the opportunity and put a strategy out. That was followed up in 2019 with our hydrogen action plan that Eleanor ran through. We have supported a number of pilot demonstration projects. Eleanor talked about the green hydrogen project at Tonsley, the electrolyser producing hydrogen primarily to blend into the natural gas network. We're supporting other much larger scale projects under development. And obviously companies like Santos, obviously they're pursuing their CCUS projects, and also, have very publicly stated, strong ambitions around blue hydrogen production, trying to really leverage that sort of competitive advantage in onshore, CCUS in South Australia. We certainly think, we've got a competitive advantage in green with the coincidental wind and solar. So that allows you access very cheap renewable energy and still achieve very high utilisation rates on electrolysers. I guess we're sort of on the cusp, I think, of seeing electrolysers being really achieving those manufacturing economies of scale. I see someone on the chat's reference the Fortescue's recent announcements of a electrolyser production facility in Queensland, and that's the sort of thing that we, I guess, for green hydrogen really needs to see is sort of scaling up of the supply chain to hit those economies of scale and bring the capital costs down. We've, as Eleanor outlined, we've focused a lot on the regulatory framework, on international engagement, a lot of engagement into Japan, South Korea, Europe. One of the interesting projects that we did do was a hydrogen export modelling tool. So this was sort of a pre-feasibility study for hydrogen export from South Australia. So whether it's hydrogen, produced from steam methane reforming with CCUS or from renewable energy, and then converted either into liquid hydrogen, ammonia, or a liquid organic hydrogen carrier, and then exported from South Australia. So it was a complete sort of upstream supply chain mapping exercise, including looking at which ports were suitable to export hydrogen from. And the tool that was produced allows people to basically identify a free on board price for blue or green hydrogen for a given volume, for a given port, and for a given hydrogen carrier. So that's something that we're certainly seeing as a real practical step to support companies that are starting to look at sort of large scale hydrogen export projects from South Australia. And probably the only other thing I'll mention is that process and that tool identified Port Bonython as a sort of a very prospective hydrogen export port, both for blue and green hydrogen. There's actually one of the state's publicly owned ports, and the state has actually gone through an expression of interest process for industry to access land at that port for hydrogen and other projects, and we're certainly we've gone through a shortlisting process and are now working with shortlisted parties on a site sort of master planning process. So yeah, exciting times.
Yeah, no, thank you, Richard, for that detailed update. Let me get to a few of the questions from the audience for sure, and then I know there's a few more we had in reserve. Wakar, one of our members, asked about Australian federal level goals around greenhouse gas reduction and the actions being taken. Is it the federal goals that are driving the actions by NT and SA, or is it are the states the drivers of the goal of the activity in those states?
I think certainly from the NT's point of view, it's the our territory government that's driving the targets for its renewable energy resource and for the low emissions targets for 2050. I think the federal government will be shortly behind. I don't know whether the our federal government's representative want to discuss that, but certainly the territory government has been proactive in making sure those targets are met.
Yeah, fair enough.
Perhaps I can jump in from a South Australian perspective. So the state's got a net zero target by 2050 and a 50% reduction target by 2030. There's a target for 100% net renewable electricity by 2030. And there's also a raft of sort of economic targets. So I think, yeah, a lot of the drive has been, things like, blue and green hydrogen production can sort of achieve both economic growth, carbon reductions, and renewable energy targets. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And you picked up on the comment that someone made about the Fortescue joint venture. And the follow-up question is there interest in NT and SA for US hydrogen ventures, i.e. electrolyzers and fuel cells versus H2?
Well, look, certainly from a South Australian perspective, absolutely. We certainly see scaling up of hydrogen supply chains as key. So yes, fuel cells, electrolyzers, tanks, SMR units, across the whole supply chain. And I think certainly from a South Australian perspective, we've got a rich background in manufacturing. And so there is certainly a lot of capability here. Obviously, lots of things happening in space, defense, and other relevant sort of sectors.
Great. Well, we've got one question on oil and gas, and Dot, this one's for you. I think you can probably look at it as well, but basically Colin and Caddy asking about for the Beetaloo Basin having very high gas rates for over just 100-meter section. And so
yes, it's a really interesting question. It was from one of the original wells, earlier wells in the Beetaloo. It's from the recent fracture simulation test, and so that information, that data is really recent. It's only just from the recent stimulation stages. I think that it wasn't necessarily the results that were expected. So I think the Origin's going to be looking at retesting some of that flow test rates. So it's really early stage information. It's interesting. So thank you, Colin, for the question.
Well, just one last question before we wrap up, and we are getting very close to the end, but Eleanor, we didn't get a chance for you to comment on what's happening with geothermal in South Australia. So can you quickly touch on that as well? Dot mentioned a bit of what's happening up there, but what's happening in SA?
Yeah, sure. So there was I guess we had peak geothermal probably 10 years ago, where we had deep wells drilled. There was technical success. The geodynamics project was able to circulate water and recover it, and the same for petrotherm. But the really good resources are a long way from market. So it sort of went quiet, but we're seeing a lot more inquiries. We're getting license applications. So we're watching with interest to see if we get a resurgence in geothermal. The other part of it is the shallow geothermal and district heating, type facilities around new housing developments and so on. And there's a real opportunities in that space. So we're keeping an eye on both of those things at the moment. But as Dot said, you know, there's all sorts of new ideas about what you could do with geothermal energy that didn't exist 10 years ago. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah, no, thank you guys. Well, I'm going to have to bring this to a close because we're at time, but I think we could keep talking about this for another hour. And I wanted to thank both of you from Australia Energy Resources, Dot and Eleanor, for your fantastic presentations. And I know that we'll be able to provide your contact details for anyone who has any follow-up questions for you guys. And so I'd like to remind everyone that this is the second of 3 webinars that we're hosting for Australia Energy Resources. And the third one will be on November 17th, and that will feature speakers from Western Australia and Victoria talking about similar topics for their states. So that'll be November 17th in the US and November 18th in Australia. So if you've already registered for the series, you'll go ahead and receive a link automatically on the day of the webinar for that one. And I also want to let you know that the recordings of both of these webinars will be available if you want to go back and re-listen to certain spots where they presented different information. So thank you again, Australia Energy Resources, and we look forward to seeing you in November.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.